You ever grab a bottle of medicine, see that little instruction, shake well before use, and just do it without even thinking about it? Well, it turns out behind that really simple command is some seriously cool and precise pharmaceutical science. Today, we're going to pop the cap on that science and see the incredible formulation that makes it all work. Let's dive in.
So let's just start with the main question, right? Why this instruction for some liquid medicines, but not others? The whole answer is in how the drug is mixed, or maybe more accurately, how it's not mixed with the liquid it's sitting in. This isn't just a simple mixture. It's a very carefully designed system called a suspension.
Okay, so to get why we shake it, we first have to know what it is we're shaking in the first place. So what in the world is a pharmaceutical suspension? Let's break down the official definition.
Now, there's some interesting lingo on this slide. It's called biphasic, which just means it has two distinct parts or phases. You've got the dispersed phase, which are these tiny solid particles of the actual drug, and then they're just kind of floating around in the continuous phase, which is the liquid. The most important word here? Distributed. They are not dissolved.
And this table really nails the key difference. See, in a solution, think salt dissolved in water, the molecules are totally mixed in, so it looks clear. But in a suspension, the drug particles are insoluble. They're just hanging out, scattered in the liquid. That's what gives it that cloudy look, and, here's the kicker, it means that over time, gravity is going to win. Those particles will settle right to the bottom.
So, if the particles are just going to settle anyway, how do scientists make a medicine that's actually safe and effective? Well, you can't just toss some drug powder in water and call it a day. Pharmacists use a whole set of specific ingredients, they're called excipients, that act like a toolkit to control exactly how those particles behave.
And here's our toolkit. Every single one of these has a super important job. First up, you need wetting agents. These basically build a bridge between the solid drug and the liquid. Without them, the powder would just clump up and float on top. Then you have suspending agents. These thicken the liquid, kind of like adding cornstarch to gravy. It creates this scaffold that makes it harder for the particles to sink. Now, flocculating agents are, well, they're a little weird. They actually encourage the particles to form light, fluffy clumps. I know, that sounds like the opposite of what you'd want, but trust me, we'll see why it's the secret sauce in just a minute. Next, protective colloids act like tiny bodyguards, shielding the particles to stop them from growing into big, chunky crystals. And finally, of course, you've got preservatives to stop any nasty germs from growing in there.
So here's the thing. The goal of making a suspension isn't to stop the particles from settling completely. That's pretty much impossible. The real trick is to create a state of controlled instability, where the particles settle in a way that's predictable and, most importantly, totally reversible.
Let's walk through how they do it. First, you start with super fine drug particles. Then, you use those wetting agents we talked about to get them all separated and dispersed as individual particles. This is called the deflocculated state. But the magic, the real secret, happens in step 3. You add a flocculating agent to create something called the flocculated state, where the particles form these loose, lightweight clumps called flocks.
And this slide right here shows you why that is absolutely everything. A good flocculated system is like a perfect snow globe. You shake it, the flakes fly around beautifully. When they settle, they form this light, fluffy layer on the bottom that's super easy to stir up again. The opposite, the total failure, is a caked system. That's where the individual particles settle and pack together so tightly that they form a solid brick at the bottom, like an icy clump that you can't break up no matter how hard you shake.
Yeah, kicking is the ultimate nightmare for a suspension. It can happen if those protective colloids fail and the particles start to get too big, or if the formulator just adds the wrong amount of flocculating agent, making the clumps hard and permanent. And that's really dangerous, because it makes the drug impossible to dose correctly.
So how do scientists know if they've made a perfect snow globe or just a useless icy clump? They don't just guess. They have a whole checklist of rigorous quality control tests to measure the stability of their formula. One of the simplest but most important measures is called sedimentation volume, or F. All they do is let the suspension settle and then measure the height of that sediment layer compared to the total height of the liquid. A higher F value is a good thing. It means the sediment is fluffy and hasn't packed down tightly, which is exactly what you want in a good flocculated system.
But you know, a number in a lab notebook isn't the whole story. The real test is a practical one. Just like this quote says, the final product has to be easily remixed by the patient with just a bit of shaking. If you can't shake it back into a uniform liquid, it's a failure, period.
And beyond that, scientists use some really sophisticated tools to get the full picture.
They use things called viscometers to check the thickness, particle size analyzers to make sure no crystals are getting too big, and even something called a zeta potential analyzer. This thing actually measures the tiny electrical charge on the surface of each particle. That charge is so important because it controls whether the particles push each other away or pull together and clump. It's all part of this incredibly detailed process to guarantee safety and stability.
Which brings us all the way back to where we started, the shake. Now we can see that this one simple action is actually the final, critical step that brings all of that careful science to life.
So, if there's one thing to take away, it's this: that Shake Well label isn't a suggestion. It's an instruction for you to complete the formulation process. The pharmacists design those particles to settle into a light, fluffy, easily disturbed layer. Your shake is what reverses that gentle settling, making sure the drug particles are evenly spread out so that every single spoonful you take has the exact, correct, and safe dose of medicine. It's really an incredible balancing act, isn't it? All happening inside that little bottle. It kind of makes you wonder, what other invisible science, what other hidden toolkits and careful calculations are at work making sure the medicines we rely on every single day are safe and effective?